अस्सलाम वालेकुम। वेलकम टू द लाइव इंटरव्यू सीरीज बाय मोनिम बातूनी। और आज जो हमारे गेस्ट हैं, बेसिकली ही इज फ्रॉम पाकिस्तान बट ही इज सेटल्ड इन यूके। और मैं अगर उनका तारुफ कराता चलूं तो बड़ी रिनोन शख्सियत हैं। नाम है उनका मोहम्मद अमीन MBE. He was born in Pakistan, but he has lived in the UK since 1952. He has done a degree in mathematics from Cambridge University, and he is a chartered accountant and chartered tax advisor in UK. In 1990, he was the first Muslim to become a partner in the accounting firm of Price Waterhouse in the UK. He retired in 2009. Amongst other activities, he's a chairman of the Islam and Liberty Network, a think tank based in the Kuala Lumpur. Further, we will ask some more questions, some more information regarding Muhammad Amir. I'm going to welcome our guest. He's our guest, and he's such a wonderful person. I'm going to welcome Mr. Muhammad Amin. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum Islam.
Sir, first of all, I'm very thankful to you that you came to my show, and it's such an honor for me to host you in a Monil Batuni show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, first of all, I would like that you should introduce yourself and tell something about you, that who is Muhammad Amin, and from where you are and where nowadays you are living and what are you doing.
I was born in a remote village in Toba Tek Singh in Pakistan in 1950. And at the age of 1 year and 9 months, my mother brought me to England, where my father had already come. He came to the UK for the first time in 1931, and then went back after partition, stayed for about 3 years, and they came to the UK when my mother was pregnant. And I've lived in the UK ever since. My parents were both very poor. They could not read or write, but they understood the importance of education. They prayed for me to succeed in my education. They gave me every opportunity. And mashallah, I was very successful at school. And I went to the top university in the United Kingdom, Cambridge University. And later on, I became an accountant.
Thank you so much, sir, for introducing yourself and regarding your family. It's such an honor for us that you are basically from Pakistan and you are from the Toba Singh, and it's situated in the Punjab. I went there last year in 2019 and saw the Toba Singh, so famous city in the Pakistan. Okay, sir, we are going to talk regarding, as you are a chartered accountant, and you have done a lot of things in the account field. But first of all, I would ask you that what is the situation of the Muslim who are living in the UK, and what is their progress in their academic studies, their business, their professional life, and how they can be a part of politics. Tell us about that.
Well, I've lived in the UK since the 1950s. And if I look back, first of all, at the small group of Pakistani children in Manchester that I grew up with, my friends from that age, about a half of my friends, including me, went to university. And I'm talking 1968, 1969, which was the time that we would be of the right age to go to university. In those days, only about 7% of white British people went to university, whereas amongst my friends, who all came from mostly slightly poor backgrounds, 50% went to university. So from a very early age, Pakistanis in Britain have been making wonderful progress. And today also, when there are many, many more people of Pakistani origin in the UK, a very high proportion of them, slightly more, I think, than of white British people, go to universities. They don't, on average, go to as good a university as white British people. And I think that may be partly because too many of them want to go to university in their hometown. But academically, they have made very good progress. They made very good progress in the business world, in the professions, in amongst doctors, accountants, solicitors. And the community is progressing well. At the same time, parts of the community, particularly those who live in some of the more backward towns in the UK, places like Bradford or Blackburn, I think have held themselves back. Very many people of Pakistani origin are taxi drivers, which is not a wonderful profession. It's very low paid. It requires low skills. But so we have a community which is going two directions. You have people who are very successful, and you have other people who seem a little bit stuck and need to make more progress. They need to change their thinking. They need to change the way that they live. One of the things that I think holds back people is many families try very hard to get their child, their son or their daughter, married back home in Pakistan. And quite often you are bringing either daughters-in-law or sons-in-law from Pakistan with very limited education, with very limited English, and then you're starting a new generation of families where the children don't have the benefit of having educated parents. We have 4 children. Both myself and my wife have been to university, so obviously our 4 children had a very big advantage when they were growing up, a much bigger advantage than I had when I was growing up, because they had 2 university graduates as parents. So all 4 of my children went to university. 2 of my children have a PhD.
That's good, and that's you are exactly right that most of the people try to do the wedding of their children in Pakistan and back to the Pakistan, and most of them are not too much highly educated. Either they have done just a matric or just FSC, and they are doing business, and then they went to the UK, US, and further Europe countries, and they can't settle as like other who are already went there and they have done their studies. Okay, sir. I'm going to ask you a question regarding whether Islam is compatible with the freedom, especially in economic freedom and political freedom and religious freedom in the UK. What do you think?
First of all, in the UK, Muslims are very free. You are free in the UK to practice any religion or to have no religion. It's your free choice. The government will never interfere with you, and there are laws against discriminating against people for jobs or for the provision of services by religion or by race or by sexual preference or by gender. So the United Kingdom is a very, very free country. But coming back to Islam itself, I believe personally very strongly, and the Islam and Liberty Network, a think tank in Kuala Lumpur, of which I'm the chairman, carries out research in the sources of Islam to show that Islam is fully compatible with, and in fact, Islam actually supports religious freedom, political freedom, and economic freedom. And these 3 freedoms are essential for a country to progress and to succeed. A country where you need permission from the government before you can start a shop is a very different country from a country where you can start a shop. If you want to start a shop, you just go out and rent a shop and start without needing permission, without needing a license. A country where you elect your government, you replace the government if it's no good, is a very different country from a country like Syria, where there is a dictatorship in power which exists for the benefit of the dictator and his family rather than for the good of the country. Political freedom, economic freedom, and religious freedom are all an important part of making a country successful. If you look at the most successful countries in the world, they are countries that have all 3 of those things.
Okay, as you know that Islam is a religion where they give a freedom for us, freedom in economic, freedom in business, in our religious and politics, each and everything Islam give us. Then why a majority of Muslim countries who are the members of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, lag behind in their development? Why is it? When they are Muslim, they are following the rules according to Muslim, but now still they are lagging in the development. Why?
The main reason, I believe, is that the people in power in those countries, first of all, want to keep power. So there is a big lack of political freedom. In Syria, for example, we have had a dictatorship for decade after decade after decade. The same in Egypt, where we've had dictatorships ever since the Nasser the army came to power under Nasser around about 1950, apart from just a couple of years when, after the Arab Spring in 2011, we had genuine elections for a short period of time. In Pakistan, the history of Pakistan is a period of democratic governments interrupted by army dictatorships. And when a government is in power through force, through dictatorship, one of the ways that they try to keep their power is by using religion for political purposes. So in Pakistan, for example, the dictator Zia-ul-Haq, one of the ways that he tried to become more popular was by, quote, being more Islamic, by introducing so-called Islamic laws about crime, the hudud punishments, but it was a religion being used for political purposes. And that we see very regularly throughout the OIC. In the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, you have a royal family which regards the country as its own property. The royal family has ruled Saudi Arabia since the 1920s when they managed to conquer it with their tribespeople. And they, again, for a long time have had this arrangement with the religious hierarchy whereby the royal family say, we will enforce your religious rules and help you to control other people, to keep down Shias in eastern Saudi Arabia. And in return, you will never criticize us, the royal family. So in many OIC countries, you find political freedoms taken away. The economic freedom is taken away as well because the ruling powers, the ruling family, want to preserve all economic opportunities for themselves. So they don't allow their people to have economic opportunity. And they use religion as a political tool, as a way of keeping themselves in power. So these three things link together in a negative way.
Okay, sir. I want to ask one more question regarding your name. As your name is Muhammad Amin, MBE. What exactly that MBE means?
MBE is a type of honor. Britain is a very old country, and it has many, many different kinds of honors and titles: lords, dukes, sirs, dames, etc. The Order of the British Empire is one of these categories of honor, and this order was created in 1917 by the king at that time. I think it was King George V. And he realized that there were many, many military honors, but there were very few honors for civilians. And the Order of the British Empire is created as a category of honor for civilians. And there are many grades. The top grades are two different kinds of knights. Then below that, the grade is CBE for Commander of the Order of the British Empire, then OBE for Officer of the Order of the British Empire, then the bottom grade is Member of the Order of the British Empire, and that is what I have received. I received that honor because somebody who I didn't know who sent it in, but somebody nominated me by filling in a form and sending it to the Prime Minister's department, saying that Muhammad Amin is working very hard to build up good relations between Muslims and Jews in Greater Manchester, because one of my other things that I do is that I'm the co-chairman of the Muslim Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester. He's helping to build solid ties in the community in Manchester between people, and for this reason he deserves an honor. And the Prime Minister's department agreed, which is why I received the honor. I went to Buckingham Palace and I received it from Prince Charles in 2016.
And tell me how, if someone wants that MBE award, how you can or he can nominate for that award, or this award is exactly nominated by the government.
No, the award is given by the government. You cannot nominate yourself, but any person can nominate somebody else. There is a form, you can go to the government website, you download the form, you fill it in. It helps if you get letters of support from other people. You then send this form to the Cabinet Office, which is a department of the government very close to the Prime Minister's residence. And then they look at these. They get many, many more forms than they want to give honors. So they have to decide who merits one and who does not merit one. I'm sure they do other searches. I imagine they would do Google searches. They would look through newspapers to see, is there any bad information about this person? So they go by the nomination and also by any other information that they may have. Then they either decide that the person does get an honor or does not get an honor. But anybody in the country can make nominations.
Oh, that's good. Okay, sir. I want to ask you a question. As you are the first Muslim who became a partner in accounting firm of Pricewaterhouse, the UK, in throwback to 1990 when I didn't born up. So tell us about that.
Accounting firms normally recruit people from university, and then you move up the ranks. I didn't join Pricewaterhouse from university. After I left university, I trained as a teacher because I did not know what I wanted to do for my career. But in my first year as a school teacher, I discovered accountancy. I was interested, so I decided to leave teaching and train as an accountant. And when I wanted to start training, the big firms were already full, so I trained with a very small firm. I was very successful in my examinations with that small firm. In fact, in one of the examinations, I came 5th in the country out of 4,500 students. And then after I qualified, I left that small firm. I joined one of the big international firms, Arthur Andersen, as a tax specialist. So I've been a tax specialist since I qualified as a chartered accountant. I stayed with them for 6 years. I became a manager. The first time I left the country was in 1981 when I went to America with Arthur Andersen to attend the new manager training school near Chicago. I left Arthur Andersen after 6 years of working there, joined another small firm, became a partner there, but didn't like it. So 3 years after joining that small firm, I joined Pricewaterhouse as a senior manager. That's the top grade below partner at that time. And 3 years later, I was chosen to be a partner because of the quality of my work.
Okay, that's good. Okay, sir. Now I want to ask, yes, you are the part of a think tank named the Islam and the Liberty. So first of all, tell us about what is the Islam and Liberty Network and what does the think tank do for Islam and the Liberty Network?
Okay, the Islam and Liberty Network was founded in Istanbul about 6, 7, 8 years ago. I was not involved at that time. I became involved because one of my other activities for many years has been politics. And at a conference about politics in London, I sat next to an old lady. She's several years older than me, and I'm 69 now. And whenever I sit next to people at conferences or anywhere else, I start talking to them. So I started talking to her. She told me about her own background and career. And she was a council member of the Islam and Liberty Network, told me about the Islam and Liberty Network. And I decided to become a supporter of the Islam and Liberty Network. Then they asked me to join the council. So I joined the council. Then when the previous chairman had to stand down, my council members asked me if I would become the chairman. And the purpose of a think tank is to engage in research, to write publications, to organize conferences. And that is what the Islam and Liberty Network does. It holds a conference every year, although this year, because of coronavirus, we are not having a conference. We plan to have one in 2021. At the conference, academics, students, researchers present papers. Those papers are discussed. They are published on the website of the Islam and Liberty Network. The recordings are converted into podcasts. They hold webinars. The purpose is to create and spread good ideas. And that's what a think tank does.
Sir, I want to ask you, when you received the award MBE, what was your at that time, what was your thinking? Was a lot of newspaper also reached you, news channels reached you. So what was your statement at that time? What was your feeling exactly when you received an MBE award?
I was very pleased to receive it for two main reasons. First of all, it's always nice to be acknowledged, but more importantly, it provides an example to other people. So it provides an example, first of all, to other Pakistanis in the UK, that Pakistanis in the UK, Muslims in the UK are recognized by the government, are valued by the government, do go to places like Buckingham Palace, do meet people like Prince Charles. So that encourages other Pakistanis, other Muslims to feel a part of this country. There's also a very powerful message for people who are white British, people who might be slightly racist, to help them to understand that they have in their country very many people from a Pakistani background, from a Muslim background, who are making a major contribution to British society and are being recognized for that. So those are the two main reasons why I was so pleased about the award. Not for myself. I mean, I have other awards, although it's always nice to have an award like an MBE, but because my getting the award has these messages for other people.
Sir, I'm going to quote your statement you gave to the Asian Express story at that time when you received that award. The wonderful thing about the UK is that it doesn't matter where you were born, what your ethnic group is, what is your religious belief, provided you are willing to sign up to the values of the Britain stand for, then you can be as British as anyone else. That is the one thing we can call agree upon. Given this statement, exactly. Yes, sir.
That's right. I mean, that is something which I think is so important about the United Kingdom. Look at my whole life story. You have the child of two people from the Indian subcontinent who cannot read or write, whose English is very poor, who themselves are very poor. The country provides free education. They send that little boy to not just a very good school at the age of 11, but to the best university in the country, paid for by the government. You're treated absolutely equally like anybody else in this country from the very beginning. So, and that has continued throughout my life. When Price Waterhouse, the partners of Price Waterhouse, were choosing who to take on as a new partner, they look at all of their people, but they look at them equally. They do not say this person is white, so we must give him an advantage compared to this person who has a brown skin. They want the best people.
Exactly. They want the best people from the world. And sir, also I want to know about their education system, as you were living there since 1952 and it's now 2020. So I want to know exactly what change is there if you compare the schools education system with Pakistan or some other countries, what UK have the most best thing in their school education?
Well, first of all, education in the United Kingdom at school from the age of 3, if you go to nursery, or 5 when you start the primary school, to the age of 18, is completely free, paid for by the government. Now, I know that Pakistan also has government provided education, but I think Pakistan does not spend enough government money on education, and also does not control the staff, the budgets as carefully. Living in this country, I read newspapers like The Economist, which is a major British international newspaper. And one of the things I regularly read about schools, not just in Pakistan, but also in countries like Kenya, other African countries, is in many cases, the teachers are happy to take the government pay, but provide very little education. There is no proper checking of the performance of these teachers. In Britain, schools are inspected very regularly by government-appointed inspectors to ensure that their standards are adequate. The British government puts far more emphasis on education than the government in Pakistan, in my opinion, and not just spending the money, but also making sure the money is well spent and that the teachers are doing their job.
Exactly, you're right. That the teachers in Pakistan and some other countries, they are not delivering as the teachers of the UK and the developing countries are providing. And that's the best thing is that you tell me about the British school system, that from class nursery or kindergarten to the university, the education is free. That's the best thing, that everyone can, who want to study, they can study without any giving any fees. They just need a uniform and they just went to the school and they can do their studies. That's the best thing. That's why they are so much developed. Am I right, sir?
Yes.
Thank you so much, sir, for the time you've given to me. It's an honor for me to have you on my show. In the end, I would like to ask you that if you want to give an positive message for our viewers, for our audience, for our listeners. So, mic is yours.
The positive message I would like to give your viewers in Pakistan is that, first of all, I think Pakistan has started to move in the right direction. We now have had 2 civilian governments, one following another. There is nothing more important than keeping a democratic form of government. Military dictatorship may look attractive. It is always a mistake. It always works out wrong. Secondly, freedom of speech is incredibly important. You have to be able to criticize the government. You have to be able to say what you think without being afraid of either the government or being afraid of other people attacking you. And if a country has freedom of speech, if it has political freedom, then it can move forward to having more economic freedom so that you don't need licenses and government permissions to do things. Then a country can advance. Otherwise, it cannot advance.
Thank you so much, sir, for your good advice and your message. Now I'm going to end my show in the Urdu, as I am started the show in the Urdu. So thank you a lot. Thank you so much for having as my guest on my show. Thank you so much. On going to end my show on in Urdu language. आप सबका बहुत शुक्रिया देखने वालों का, और आज का शो यहीं पे इख्तिताम करेंगे इस उम्मीद और इस दुआ के साथ कि जहाँ रहें खुश रहें, अपना ख्याल रखें। और आखिर में सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट मैसेज, ऐसे तमाम हजरात जो कि 18 साल के या उसकी उम्र इससे बड़ी उम्र के और जिनकी शादियां होने वाली हैं, इनके लिए बराए करम अपना और अपनी लाइफ पार्टनर का, अपने होने वाले लाइफ पार्टनर का शादी से पहले थैलेसीमिया का टेस्ट लाजमी करवाएं, क्योंकि आज एक छोटी सी एहतियात आपके आने वाले कल को बेहतर बना सकती है। अपना ख्याल रखिएगा। अल्लाह हाफिज।